For those of you that do not know who I am, my name is Samson Pruitt. I am the owner and co-founder of Slither Incorporated. One of the best decisions that I ever made. I mean, absolutely one of the best ever was just switching to ambient temperatures. It sucks because you're going to sit in a hot-ass reptile room all the time. But it's so much easier, so much more forgiving, less dangerous, and the animals, once they get adjusted to it, absolutely love the constant fluctuation of temperature. So let's talk about ambience. You turn off all of your in-cage heat sources, you turn up or down the temperatures of your actual reptile room according to the temperature range that you desire. Let's talk about that range. In the beginning, when I started with ambient temperatures, the people that were doing it that I talked to had the entire building set at 85 degrees. Makes sense. 85 degrees is kind of in the middle between 80 and 90, which is what everybody would figure is the best way to do it. At 85 degrees, I had about a third of my collection was really, really unhappy. Either would not breed or slugged out because the males were too hot, because the females were too hot. That first year of ambient was better than any time that I had ever done in cage, but I had really, really big problems that I didn't understand and that I couldn't overcome in the beginning. If a male gets too hot, it kills his sperm. If a female gets too hot prior to breeding, it can kill the follicles so that you have dead follicles. If they get too cold, they can have similar types of issues. So I had hot spots and cold spots. In the beginning of ambience, I was in a house in a residential neighborhood. Some of you have been there. Some of you remember it. And I used the central heat and AC, which functioned really, really well. But by slamming all of those cages and racks in the rooms and covering up the vents, there were big fluctuations in temperatures that I didn't realize in the beginning, because to me it just felt like it was the same everywhere. And I didn't check individual temperatures in the beginning because I just assumed that if the wall thermostat said 85 degrees, that the whole house was 85. So I lost clutches. And I realized that first I needed to circulate better. I installed fans that blew everything around, and then the next few clutches were better, but I was still problematic, and I started to question the 85 degrees. So I just went online and I did some research in Indonesia, and I looked at the variations of temperatures during the rainy season and the breeding season for reticulated pythons. And what I found was most of the time, even though you think it is a completely tropical jungle environment, which a lot of it is, they had a 85 degree average daytime temperature. But the important thing was at night, it often dropped into the low 80s, sometimes high 70s. And this is even during the summer or the warmest part of the season, but more importantly during the breeding season. So I did the next thing. Instead of trying something too drastic, I did the next thing, which was switch to 83 degrees instead of 85 degrees. 83 degrees was a much better season for me because 85 is just too hot to force your snakes to stay all the time. At 83 degrees, I had much better clutches. At 83 degrees, I had less behavioral issues, pushing and obsessive behaviors. I had much less problems, but it still wasn't perfect. And I knew that there was room for improvement. So this past season, I just took the plunge and I started doing a fluctuation basically the same as the research had given me in Indonesia. I did about an 85 degree temperature during the day, close to that, 83, 84, 85, and then at night I would let it drop down to 80, sometimes even 78 or 79. Not because I chose to, but because the temperature outside dictates, obviously, the temperature inside. And that's something that I want to touch on really quickly. It doesn't matter what your thermostat says. Something I've noticed is the thermostat is set in my house at the same temperature year round, 72 degrees. But in the summertime, if I take a really hot shower and it's 90 degrees outside or 85 degrees outside, then my body is hotter and I sweat when I get out of the shower, when in the wintertime I don't, even if it's still 72 degrees inside the house. So just because we're able to control our climate indoors doesn't mean that our body is not responding to the climate that is outdoors. And the same has to be said for the animals. So I changed it. Now we come in the morning, and if it's cooler inside, depending on the ambient temperatures outside dictating the temperatures inside, then we will turn up the heaters a little bit and let it get warmer during the day. After a while, we found the settings that pretty much do this automatically, but it's still a manual effort because I have multiple different heating devices. So 85 during the day, guys, 80 at night, until I come up with a better program and a better system. That's what I'm going to tell you is where I'm at and what I love right now. And if all of the healthy clutches that I've pulled this season so far doesn't back me up on that, I really don't know what else does, what else could. Yeah, now let's talk about Failsafe with both different methods. I do not like in-cage heat because technology fails. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. There is no technological device or digital device that you can plug into a wall that is guaranteed to work forever. Sooner or later, that system is going to have a circuit that goes bad, a connection that goes bad. Something is going to happen and that is going to fail. And if it is your only form, then you are going to be at the risk of catastrophic failure on some level. The worst possible case catastrophic failure is when heat tape overheats and cooks an entire rack of hatchlings. How many times have all of us seen somebody come on and say, I just lost my whole collection, or I just lost all my babies, or I just lost this, or I just lost that? That's one of the biggest reasons why I stopped doing it, because there's no way that you can back it up enough to prevent the failure. It needs to be said that if you're in a bedroom and you're using an electric heater, that you need to be careful about that just as much as you would with heat tape or a heat lamp or some other form of heat that can be problematic if the thermostat fails that's controlling it. What I recommend that you do, either method that you choose, is to make sure that you have secondary and sometimes even third backups in place. And I'll explain to you how that works. When you're running a rack system or a series of enclosures that have heat tape or heat panels, you should have a fail-safe, you should have a thermostat plugged into a thermostat. One that kills it if it gets too hot, behind one that is set on the temperatures that you really want. This gives you the ability to prevent the heat sources from overheating should something fail. When you're running ambience, it's really easy. You have a heat source or multiple different heat sources depending on the size of your collection. In the Slither Inc facility right now, I have two 7,500 watt electric heaters that have built-in thermostats that are both set to the same temperature. So if one of those heaters dies, the other one kicks on as backup, and they both operate during the period of time to make it easier from one end of the facility to the other. As a backup method, I have two air conditioning units. I have a central heat and AC unit, and I have a window unit that both stay on full time should we have heater malfunction that could cause the heaters to overheat the building. If I were to have a problem where the heat sources malfunction and one of them just kept going and running all the time, then the air conditioners would cut on and battle that at the very least until somebody is able to adjust the problem and fix it. It's actually more dangerous in the summertime because the outside heat is not something that can be controlled by a thermostat. And, you know, sun beating down on a building that's full of animals can cause it to overheat really quickly. Heat is your enemy. Your animals getting too cold will kill them, yes, but it takes a long period of time to get to that point. So anyway, in the summertime, I recommend that you always have two different methods of air conditioning. You have one that is your main source. You have a secondary that's a backup. And that gives you the ability to prevent the problems that can come from your technology failing. I can't think of anything else to say about temperatures and temperature fluctuations and the reasons for why I'm doing than what I've just given you. So communicate with me and let me know what you want to hear, and I'll help you any way that I can.